All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Tonight, we're not just looking at a map, we are literally dissecting a nightmare. Highway 44. Just hearing the name carries this heavy weight, a very specific kind of dread for anyone who's had to drive it in the dead of night. We're going to break down a really chilling, documented account from the Skull Tales archives. It's about a truck driver named Kamlesh, whose totally routine midnight drive turned into a terrifying fight for survival. Okay, let's dive into this. If I were a ghost, would I speak to you so politely? I mean, just imagine hearing that out of the absolute pitch black of a dense forest. This right here is the exact phrase that hooked Kamlesh. It's honestly brilliant manipulation. It uses logic to completely disarm your primal fear. What we're exploring today is exactly how these psychological traps are set, even by the supernatural, and how easily our own human empathy can be weaponized against us. Section 1, a lonely midnight drive on Highway 44. Let's set the scene. To truly get this, you have to put yourself right in Kamlesh's seat. It's midnight. He's behind the wheel of this massive, heavy truck, miles deep into Highway 44. There are zero streetlights out there, no passing cars, just the hypnotic, heavy hum of his engine and a road slicing straight through a dense, unforgiving jungle. The isolation isn't just physical here, it's heavily psychological. By the early AM hours, the guy's eyes are burning with severe fatigue. His grip on the wheel is tight, his mind is just numb. And then, right at 3 a.m., the classic witching hour, he has to violently slam on the brakes. Why? Because right in the dead center of his headlights, this white figure just appears. The tires screech, tearing through the silence, and the truck jerks to a halt literally feet away. But when he looks out, his brow dripping with sweat, there is absolutely no one there. The road is completely empty. So he's sitting there, right? And he tries to convince himself it's just an illusion. A trick of the mind born out of sheer exhaustion. He actually slaps the dashboard and mutters to himself, "Kamlesh beta, don't fear. You are not alone. Your truck is with you." He's just grasping for any sort of anchor to reality and safety. But just as he's about to settle back into the cabin and catch his breath, a voice shatters that fragile comfort. A woman's voice, saying, "Brother, wait." And the truly terrifying part? That voice wasn't coming from the dark forest outside. It was coming from the back of his truck. Which brings us to Section 2, the mysterious woman, a literal call for help. Kamlesh absolutely freezes. In the dim red glow of the truck's taillights, he can make out this blurry silhouette, a woman in an old cotton sari. She tells him she's lost and desperately asks for a ride. Now, every single instinct in Kamlesh's body is screaming no. He's heard the stories, the urban legends of women on lonely roads whose feet point backward, who ask for help and then just destroy you. He outright refuses her. But now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast between what he perceives and the reality. It's a classic sympathy trap. The entity doesn't just attack, it manipulates. She tells him this heart-wrenching story, claims she's a mother just trying to get back to her kids in the city. She even breaks down crying, talking about a husband who abused her because she couldn't bear children. It's this deeply calculated, tragic backstory of barrenness and domestic abuse, perfectly designed to lower the defenses of a good, honest man. And crazy enough, it works. Kamlesh's fear is completely overridden by pity. But he does try to maintain some control over the situation. He creates this strict boundary. He tells her she can ride, but she has to sit in the empty back section right under the tarpaulin. She is absolutely forbidden from coming near the cabin, and she must never ever look toward the front. He honestly thinks these rules protect him. It gives him this totally false sense of control over a situation that frankly was never his to begin with. Moving to Section 3, the unending road. This is where the fatal mistake happens. Okay, this is where the environment itself just turns against him. Once he agrees to take her, the whole vibe in the truck radically shifts. He's back on the road, gripping the wheel, trying to convince himself everything's fine, but the universe is practically screaming at him that he messed up. The red flags just start stacking up. First, as she walked to the back of the truck, zero footsteps, just absolute dead silence. Second, once she supposedly sat down, his heavy truck suddenly felt significantly heavier to drive, like unnaturally heavy. Third, he tries to break the awful silence by turning on the radio, but it only outputs this sinister hissing white noise. And finally, the crying starts. Painful, agonizing crying from the back of the truck. A sorrow so deep it literally sends shivers right down his spine. But instead of slamming the brakes and running for his life, Kamlesh does the most human thing possible. He actually tries to comfort her. He slides the little cabin window open just a crack and says, "Everything is fine. I will safely drop you at your destination. Humanity is the biggest religion." So the crucial point here is that his empathy, his fundamental goodness as a person, is exactly what seals his fate. The entity has officially won the psychological game. Then, out of nowhere, she screams, "Stop," with such terrifying force it almost bursts his eardrums. He slams the brakes. She tells him she's reached her destination, a village she calls Satihati. Kamlesh is beyond confused because there is literally nothing around them but desolate, pitch-black jungle. No lights, no houses, nothing. She simply looks at him and says, "I am a daughter of the mountains. I don't fear the dark." She steps out, takes a few steps, and just vanishes completely into the thick mist. Let's move to this sequence and see how this builds into pure panic. Kamlesh drives off, just so relieved to finally be alone. But a few miles down, he passes this broken old sign that reads Sadikati. Pure panic sets in. He slams the accelerator, pushing this massive truck to 80, 90, then over 100 kilometers per hour. The engine is absolutely screaming. He just wants to escape this nightmare. But then, piercing through the headlights in the distance, it's the exact same Sadikati sign. The road is looping. He violently yanks the steering wheel to avoid looking at it, but the speed and the wet dirt are just way too much. He completely loses control. And then, boom, a massive explosion of metal and rock. The front of the truck is instantly shattered into pieces. The engine is smoking into the cold night air. And then, total, deafening silence falls over the forest. Kamlesh's head has smashed against the steering wheel, and he just tumbles out of the wrecked cabin, collapsing onto the cold, unforgiving asphalt. Section 4. A desperate call. He is completely alone in the dark. You know, the supernatural terror is scary, but the sheer hopelessness of the mundane aftermath is almost worse. He's severely injured, utterly alone in the middle of nowhere, bleeding, terrified, desperate for any sign of human life. He tries to scream for help, but his vocal cords just betray him. Only this choked whisper comes out. Suddenly, headlights. A fast car is approaching. Kalesh waves frantically, but the car doesn't even tap the brakes. It blurs past him so fast the wind actually knocks him back down onto the road. Minutes later, a truck appears. This time, Kalesh stands right in the middle of the road. The truck lays on the horn, a long, horrifying blast, but instead of stopping, it actually speeds up, nearly crushing him before disappearing into the dark. He is entirely, utterly abandoned by the living. So, completely out of options, he pulls out his absolute last lifeline, his cell phone. The faint glow of that screen is literally his only light out there. With trembling, bloody hands, he dials his boss. He rambles out the whole story, the woman, the looping road, the crash. His boss, surprisingly calm, tells him to keep his cool and immediately send photos of the wrecked truck and the surrounding location so he can send an emergency crew. This moment right here, this is the major turning point of the investigation, because these photos suddenly shift from being just a routine insurance claim to becoming horrifying, concrete evidence. Which brings us to our final section, the chilling reveal, the horrifying evidence. Kamalesh snaps the photos from every angle in the dark and hits send. He waits. Minutes drag by. And then his phone rings. It's his boss, and the man is frantic. He's literally screaming exact survival instructions at him. Step 1, run immediately. Step 2, stop the very first car you see, jump in, do whatever it takes. And step 3, and he stresses that this is the most important, do not, under any circumstances, look back. Even if someone calls your name, even if you hear crying, do not look back. Kamlesh tries to protest, right? He's asking about the expensive cargo, the ruined truck, but his boss just cuts him off with this bone-chilling line. To hell with the truck. I am telling you, run from there. So the crucial point is this. A transport boss, a man whose entire livelihood is tied to that vehicle and its cargo, is willing to abandon it instantly. He saw something in those photos so horrific that the massive financial loss meant absolutely nothing. Kamlesh doesn't ask any more questions. That very night, he ran blindly into the darkness, driven entirely by sheer primal fear. By the next morning, he had miraculously made it out of the forest and reached a nearby village, physically safe, but deeply, deeply traumatized. It actually took 2 full days for him to gather enough courage to meet his boss face to face, because he needed to know. He had to understand what on earth was in those photos that made his boss react with such absolute, unfiltered terror. So he walks into the office. His boss, who is still visibly shaken, pulls out his phone,
He slowly swipes to the very last photograph Kamlesh had sent of the wrecked cabin. And there it was. The woman? She was never sitting in the back of the truck. Throughout that entire agonizing drive, through the heavy silence, the terrifying red flags, and that looping nightmare of a road, she was sitting inside the cabin, right next to the driver's seat, looking straight at the camera and smiling.
Unsurprisingly, Kamlesh never drove that road again. Actually, scratch that. He never drove alone again, period. Because this whole explainer forces us to realize a deeply unsettling truth. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't the desolate road outside, but what you've unknowingly invited inside. Some roads carry way more fear than destinations. So the next time you're driving alone in the pitch black and the hairs on the back of your neck start to stand up, ask yourself, who is really traveling with you?